Okay, how's everybody doing today? Of course, my name is Kent. The channel is EOS Bitcoin San Diego, and I'm actually doing an early morning video, 8:57 a.m. That's early morning for me on June 29th. And I thought I'd talk a little bit about some things going on in the market today. In fact, I looked at Bitcoin here just a few minutes ago, and it's climbing. We're up to $36,213. So we're going in the right direction. We've been going in the right direction for the last couple of days. But for most people that own Bitcoin, if you've owned it for any time at all, this is not an unusual drop. And it's actually a healthy drop because the overall trajectory of Bitcoin has been that the price is vastly appreciating over all other assets. So you just have to be in it at the right time. And I think I was reading yesterday, those times to be in Bitcoin usually are about 10 or 11 days a year. So there's really not a way to trade in and out of Bitcoin. You have to stay in Bitcoin, hold Bitcoin, and get that 200, 300, 400, 500 to 600% increase. And you're only going to get it in a very short, small window of time. So there's no way to say, I'm going to be out when it's 35 and then jump in, back in when it goes to 38, because you're going to have a hard time missing that 1 or 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 days where it may go from 36 to 86 or to 96, and then 100,000, and then we'll trade sideways and go back down from that point of the market. So this is just a normal thing for Bitcoin. This is if you're going to get the kinds of appreciations we've had this year, which if you look over the last 24 months, it's pretty good on Bitcoin. Let's just look over the last 24 months. If you look at Bitcoin when it's done, about 300% interest, 300%, 296.4. So I'll take the 296.4 and have maybe a 50% drop right now here in the last 30 days. So yeah, this all eventually works in the favor of the person that continues to hold Bitcoin. And I think most people do hold Bitcoin. I don't see anybody selling Bitcoin for any reason other than the fact that they couldn't afford to hold it if they bought it recently and they just wanted to try the market, got in, it didn't work out for them, so they got out really quickly. But nobody buys Bitcoin to sell it. Everybody buys Bitcoin to keep it and hold it. But you have to get a little bit of time in market so you can financially weather these downturns or down times. So that's what it is. So this is the best place to be. And right now is a good time to buy Bitcoin. And it will be a good time until, I think the next big jump's probably going to be well over 60,000. And hopefully by the end of the year, we're looking at $100,000 Bitcoin and maybe 120, 150 by the next spring. We'll see. But that's, I think, where we're going to go in. So anyway, I want to talk today about how we got here, a little bit about history of money and why we are seeing Bitcoin as our only way out of the current financial situation that we're in. And I found a video, and it was actually a pretty interesting video. I like history, and I like to listen to history videos. This video is from what Bitcoin did, and the name of the video is From Petrodollar to a Bitcoin Standard with Alex Gadstein and Nick Carter. So they go into a little bit of the stuff that how we arrived in our current situation with Bitcoin, on how the United States dollar became world reserve currency. And really this all starts off with just the definition of what money is. And everybody can debate this. Basically it's I'm going to read it from the properties here. It's fungibility, durability, divisibility, portability, cognizability, and scarcity. I mean, that defines money pretty much. And that's why for almost since most people can remember, or since recorded in history books, money has been some sort of metal, a precious metal, because it meant most of these properties. And as governments would hold on to the metal, the gold, the silver, whatever other copper, whatever other precious metal, these were obviously needed to be stored. There was a security issue. And as countries, especially in Europe, would be at war, World War I, World War II. The aggressor being, Nazi Germany, Napoleon, they would go around Germany or go around Europe in war, and they would loot countries. They would literally march into a country, and their frontline soldiers would go right into the small little town. They'd go right to the banks, and they would loot the gold, take the gold. And as this was happening during World War II, a lot of the European countries were fearful that the Nazis were going to roll in and just steal all the gold, of which they probably stole quite a bit of it. So they became very worried, and they didn't know what to do. So they got together and decided to ship the gold someplace that wasn't right in the middle of the battle, which was the United States. The United States, being somewhat safe, being protected by the two oceans, was the recipient of a lot of gold from European banks. So the United States could keep it safe. But they had an agreement that they were basically just saving it, keeping it safe for these countries during this war period. And when the war was over with, that we would go on some sort of agreement or standard of which the gold would be redeemable for their own currency. We would give them back gold for their own currency, or we would hold the gold and create an agreement as far as using the dollar to trade in, which was the Bretton Woods agreement, where they had the dollar was affixed to gold. And it was affixed to gold for sovereigns, not for everyday ordinary people. That had been taken away previously through the previous administration. But basically, if a government was going to put gold on lend gold to the United States, that there was an open window for that government to come in and pick up their gold whenever they wanted to pick it up. And this is an interesting video about this, a little bit about this history. And in 1971, I believe, let's go to this video here. In 1971, France actually decided that they wanted to come and get their gold and sent a warship into New York Port Island, the port of New York, to get their gold back. And here I'll play just a little bit of this video so you can hear what they say in this about this situation.
So, the system that Nick described came under heavy stress at the end of the 60s, and the early 1970s really set the stage for, this transition to a new kind of world economy. Now, just a couple like big events I wanted to hit for the audience. As I mentioned, Nixon ended convertibility of gold in the late summer of 71. This kind of immediately devalued the dollar by 10%. So the fears of the world were founded. The U.S. was, at the end of the day, not to be trusted to guard the world's reserve currency, and its war in Vietnam and social programs made it sort of like impossible for it to guarantee the promises it once extended. Now, the world kind of went into a very inflationary decade in the coming years. The next sort of big event I would hit is in 73. We have like this dynamic in oil really shifting. So,
yeah, let's see. Let me see if I can go back just a little bit where he talks about the gold, the warship. I mean, so France is already getting a little bit worried about U.S. spending and the war in Vietnam, of which they were really drug into the war in Vietnam probably by the French, because the French were originally fighting the war, and then the United States came in to kind of give them a hand. And I think there was probably some discussions about the gold that the United States owed to France, and so the U.S. needed to help them out in Vietnam. That's probably how they got there. But I'm going to go back to 1149. Let me see here, 1149. Because there was actually a warship, French warship, brought in to New York Harbor to come and get the gold, which is incredible.
And social spending, and they just didn't think the U.S. could sustain the system, so they were ready to take their gold back. So Nixon would end up doing is financing U.S. debt. So when you got up to the late 60s, Britain actually kind of defaulted, let's say, and ended up having to devalue the pound in the late 60s as a result of a lot of poor fiscal policy and its colonial collapse. And a lot of the other powers started to really worry the same thing could happen to the US. So in the summer of 71, actually the French sent like a battleship to New York City.
Okay, there you go. In 71, the French send a battleship to New York City to get their gold, or get some of their gold back. Now, I don't remember. I was alive in 1971 as a young kid, 11, 12 years old, but I don't ever remember this being reported in the news. And I actually went into research it online, and I did do a little bit of research. I think I did find a paper that talked about this. That talked literally about how the French. Let me see if I can find that paper. How the French. It's a. I think it's Columbia. Let me see. It's. Where did I find that? It wasn't on Reddit, but I think the Reddit was the one that gave me the link for it. So let me go to Reddit. And then I think you have to go to Reddit interview with the right here, the 2016 paper at the Columbia Law School. And I think if you go to page number 17, you're going to read about this, and this is interesting stuff because not reported in the news in the day. In August 1971, I'm going to write here, French President Pompidou sent a battleship to New York Harbor to remove France's gold from the vault of the New York Federal Reserve Bank and to transport it to the Banque de France in Paris. Soon thereafter, gold accounts for 92% of French reserves. On August 11th, the British requested that the Treasury remove the $3 billion of gold from the U.S. Department of Fort Knox to the New York Federal Reserve Vault, where the gold of foreign governments were stored. So these governments that had entrusted the United States with holding on to the old gold during this very traumatic time of World War II, where the Germans were just basically overrunning towns and going in and taking whatever they wanted, including gold. I get a kick. I like to watch a lot of history stuff, and when Napoleon went into the Soviet Union, and as his troops were in retreat on the Soviet Union, the average soldier was carrying a lot of stuff that had nothing to do with fighting, but everything to do with trying to make as much money from the campaign as possible. So a French soldier would be carrying, a few rounds of ammunition, but 4 or 5 gold silver cups, or 3 or 4 gold pieces of jewelry that they had found or looted or something like that. So when they go into these countries, like Napoleon did, like Hitler did, they loot the countries. And that's the problem with the definition of money is how do you protect it? How do you make it protectable when you've got literally armies that can come in there and just remove it from everyday ordinary people and everyday ordinary banks and in their physical vaults. They'll just come in with their machinery, with their tanks, with their guns, and they'll just take it. So that makes gold very non-portable. I mean, it really knocked gold out as far as portability is concerned, because you get scared. And when you get scared, you got to put it someplace where somebody can take care of it. And that just so happened to be somebody like within the United States that later didn't want to give it back. And France even sends a warship to the United States and says, give us back our gold. And basically Nixon says, no, we're not going to do that anymore. We've closed the gold window, which at that point created this basically spinning wheel that we've been on for the last 35, 40 years, actually since 70, almost 50 years, this treadmill that we've been on where there is no financial security. And it shows up in each and every one of our everyday lives. I mean, if you don't think this stuff affects you, the history of money and how this current economic system works, think about the anxiety that this creates by the fact that nobody ever feels completely secure in their economic environment. I mean, what used to be money 10 years ago doesn't seem like so much money today. And as we continue to do this, create money, people, especially the younger generation, have a lot of anxiety over their financial futures. When, like in the area we live in today, when we moved out here 25 years ago, $350,000, you were getting into the housing market. Well, today, if you want to get into the housing market out here, you're probably looking at close to $1 million. So if a young person that is growing up here, like my children are growing up during that era, they're looking at spending $1 million on a house. They're getting pretty excited because I realize that that's a pretty difficult amount of money to make, especially given the fact that we're eliminating jobs, automating jobs, using technology to get rid of jobs. And you got to have some pretty good income in order to come up with the kind of money to buy a home. And this has all created anxiety. It has created an entire group of people of coming up into this world of working and world of going to school and trying to figure out what you're going to do with yourself, and not being able to have any kind of stability or stable measure of if you're going to be successful or not. Because all you know is you've got to keep making more and more and more to be able to just stay even with a standard of living that you're hoping to have for your entire life. And not only that, to be able to have a family, to have children, to have a wife, and be able to hopefully have your wife spend some time with your children, and have you hopefully spend some time with your children. And the more you work, the more this economic system runs out of control like it is right now. The harder you're going to have to work, the longer you're going to have to work for less money. So that's why people that are in this right now, they have a lot of anxiety. And if they study the history over this, they'll see why. Because we're in an out of control money creating system that has to have some stability placed back into the way it works. And the only way you do that is you throw in some tangibles or some constants, something that is tangible and constant and meets these properties of what you just talked about. And that would be Bitcoin. I mean, we have a supply constant. We have a protocol that runs with security. We have the ability to move it around digitally. And we have a way of measuring it so that it's not something that if Joe Biden gets up tomorrow morning and decides he wants to spend $1 trillion or $2 trillion or $3 trillion more to stimulate the economy, and he gets the Congress to go along with it, that now your houses are worth $2 million instead of $1 million. That's like the insecurity of having Elon Musk tweet and making whatever tweet he makes, if it's understood or non-understood, still doesn't have it makes the market go crazy, because we don't know what he means, and we know that he influence a lot of people, and he can have access to lots of money. So there is no stability with Elon Musk's tweets. That's just the way that the monetary system works today. There's just no stability with it. So this creates a lot of anxiety. And that's why it's good to study history and good to go back and look at where we're at today. And where we're at today is that we need the Bitcoin system. And the Bitcoin system is very important for the mental health and stability of the future generations. If we don't have it, we've got nothing else to take its place. And everything right now isn't working. It's like the El Salvadorian president said the other day, we're not doing so good in the current system. Why wouldn't we want to try a change? And that's what we need. We need to change out of the current system into the system, the digital system, the economic system that has some stability and has the ability for people to see that there is a future, and not just that we're going into a dark hole of complete, two-class system where certain people get access to the money, other people don't get access to the money, and where you live, your geography, and your wealth depends on how much control you have over your life. If you've come from a poor country outside the banking system, you're very limited in what you can do. If you're in a wealthy country with a lot of money and have the connections with the banks, you have a much better lifestyle, a much better future than if you're coming from someplace else. So that's why this stuff is all very important. People should pay attention to it, because this is this is something that was inevitable, and we needed it. If it didn't come, there would have to be something else take its place, because the current economic system does not work. Because what happened is, after Nixon closed the gold window, and then they were able to come up with the petrodollar through Henry Kissinger, and through that they just monetized the gold that was in the Middle East. And of course that ran its course as long as it could. And of course they enforced that with U.S. military. Don't buy gold, or don't buy oil in U.S. dollars. Guess what? You got a warship in your neighborhood. So that was something that was pushed upon people, forced upon people. And that's been, something that people didn't want to participate. And then the fact, forcing people to buy U.S. debt. That's another thing. China's bought the U.S. debt. The Soviet Union's bought the U.S. debt. All these countries have bought the U.S. debt. And I think they're getting to a point to say, we're not going to buy your debt anymore. We just aren't going to hold money, because that's the only way we can trade. There's other ways to trade. And now we're finding digital currencies and these places where we can trade without all this legacy and all these other background and all this other burden that makes what we get from you not a very good deal. I mean, right now, if you're buying our debt, you're being discounted 20% a year, according to what Michael Saylor says. You're losing 20% a year to hold our debt. That's a pretty big offset to do business globally with a dollar. So this idea of Bitcoin is come. The days have arrived. In fact, it's long since arrived. It's actually late. It should have been here many, many years ago, but it is here. It's tested the test of time. It's met the test of time. Now it's time for it to prosper and grow. And that's what we're doing right now. We'll be out of this $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 range pretty quickly. And then we'll be off in, I think, over 100,000 pretty soon. But just forget about the daily news of Bitcoin, because it really is pretty worthless. What Michael's, even to the point of, I see where all these people are getting into the argument as far as if Bitcoin's dead or not, if it's going to survive this last downturn. And that's the way it always feels. Every time Bitcoin takes a little bit of a downturn, everybody says, is Bitcoin dead? I mean, I've been through 2 or 3 of these cycles, and it feels the same way every time. It's taken a 50% drop. Is it gone? Is it dead? Is it never coming back? Well, it always comes back, and it's not done so for the last 10 years. And instead of having just, your own, thoughts on this, you got everybody else willing to throw their thoughts into it too. People like, and of course, Michael Saylor is a good spokesman for Bitcoin, but you've got people like Jack Dorsey. You've got the rich dad, poor dad guy. You got Mark Cuban. You got all these people that they've now become experts on Bitcoin. They never understood Bitcoin, never knew anything about Bitcoin before, but now all of a sudden they come in, they give you a daily analysis of what's going on with the Bitcoin market. And this stuff is just all extraneous information that just causes more anxiety and causes the market to be more haywire. And then you really don't know what you should be doing with the buying or selling of Bitcoin. The one thing I would say, though, is the people that buy Bitcoin and hold Bitcoin do very well. So if you're going to buy, you need to be in a position to be able to hold, because it will eventually turn out for you. It always has and always will. And given the fact that the cryptocurrencies are the future, this is always going to be something that has profitability into it, built into it automatically. It's just gonna win every single time, because of the fixed variables that I was just talking about a little bit ago. So that's kind of where we're at today. Don't worry about where the money's going, because it is going to continue to be worth less. The cryptocurrencies are going to continue to be worth more. And you have to figure out a way to build that into your life so you can continue to hold as much as you can. And I know it's not perfect. I mean, if you want to put all your money in it, everybody needs a little money to come out to live on and do things with. So you have to sell a little bit, but you want to make sure you keep a majority of your money in Bitcoin, because if you want to make sure you hit those 2 or 3 or 4 days or 5 days, 6 days, every, year or 6, 7 months, where it's going to make that incredible jump like it did here recently. It went from 10,000 to 30,000, and from 30,000 to 60,000. I mean, that was in a pretty condensed period of time that it did that. And if you weren't in market during that particularly those particular days, you lost out. So it was almost impossible to time those days of when to get in and when to get out. So anyway, you just got to stay in and hold on. Let me read a couple of these comments by Mayweather K7. Would be better to start a new Bitcoin than the rich haven't hoarded. I'm going to address that here in a second. Let's see what's saying in the first comment. Why does it have to be this Bitcoin? It's not helpful for anyone who can't afford the price. When El Salvador gets their $30 airdrop, it will only be $300 when Bitcoin hits 300,000. So I think what Mayweather is talking about is he's talking about the fact that you've got $36,000 Bitcoin, and not many people can afford a full entire Bitcoin. But you got to realize it's divisible into any increments that you want to invest in it. Whatever you buy is going to go up or have improvements in value or over a period of time. So time and Bitcoin equal profit. Time and Bitcoin equal profit. The more time and the more Bitcoin, the more profit. It's just a simple formula. And there's nothing you can do to get around that. The fact that Bitcoin's $10 million a Bitcoin and you have a very little bit of time in it isn't any different than if a Bitcoin's $1,000 and you have a lot of time in it. I mean, it's just the amount. I think that's the thing that people get really confused about is the amounts aren't the issue. The Bitcoin is the issue. If you put 1 million or 1,000 in, the time is what's going to make the money, and also the investment. Not the fact that it's 36,000 or 46,000 or 37. That doesn't matter. I mean, if you buy 1/100 of a Bitcoin, it's still going to go up. It's not like, I think what you're saying, people are thinking is that now that it's gone up to 36,000, it's tapped out. It can't go any higher. And that is what I thought when I first looked at Bitcoin, and it was a couple $100 of Bitcoin. It just made a big jump, and I said, it's already, that's what I told my son when he was buying it. He was buying it, and I don't know what he was buying it at, but he had accumulated a little bit of money, and I said, it had just gone up 30 or 40%. I said, God, you got to sell it. That's too much. It can't continue to maintain these price increases. So I was encouraging him to sell it because I thought it had gone up too much. And see, my only thing I understood was, wow, you don't see appreciations like this. Those are usually ends up being Ponzi schemes. And when you see something run up that quickly, it's going to go back down just as quickly. And you just got to get out. Well, that's not the case with Bitcoin. You have a legitimate, proven, real world case where it is a scarcity and people are buying it and holding it. And that you can see that on chain transactions, that when you have times like this, most of the accounts are basically idle. Nobody's selling. People are holding through these. And I think that was the Ray Dalio analysis. I think 86% of people are holding Bitcoin right now. There's very few Bitcoin being moved around. And there's ways that these people with a lot of money buy Bitcoin without moving the price much. So don't worry about $36,000 Bitcoin because that's irrelevant. That's the last thing you should look at. Just look at buying what you can afford as much as you can afford and then stay in for as long as you can stay in. And that's the two what you need to worry about, not worry about the amount it is. It doesn't matter because 36,000 is going to look really cheap, in 6 months to a year. I'm sure if you left me a comment today in 6 months going, wow, I wished I would have bought $36,000 Bitcoin. I felt the same way at 5,000. I was sitting at 5,000, 6,000 going, wow, it's, and at that time it was going from 5,000 to 10,000. It was jumping between the $5,000 and $10,000 range. And I was thinking, man, buying some $10,000 Bitcoin, that's pretty risky because that's a double, and that's not going to do that very often. And the next thing I know, it's 35, 40,000, and then the next thing I know, it's 60,000, and that all happened really, really, really fast. I mean, within a very, very small time frame. So you just got to do it because it's the only way in. It's the only way out. It's the only way to stay ahead of the game. And if you want to still live in constant anxiety and worry about how much money it's going to take to keep you alive and keep your money, so you can eat and live, you have to start buying Bitcoin. And I don't care if it's 36,000 or 136,000. You just have to buy Bitcoin. That's all there is to it. That's the only viable way of of keeping ahead of the money game. You can't buy stocks. You can't trust those. You can't hold it in a bank account. That's deteriorating way too fast. And you can't do any of these other crazy things that people are asking you to do, like, and investing in business today is very hard. Very difficult to own a restaurant or to own a business. And I think there's going to be more people unemployed in the future. You've got technology now, the driverless technology. Think of how many delivery people that own jobs that are driving around in delivery trucks or over-the-road truckers. They're going to someday be worried losing their jobs because an automated truck, a driverless truck, is going to be able to do the job for them without that person behind the seat. So anyway, I think this is a great thing to do. Just go ahead and start buying, get Bitcoin, and hold on as much as you can possibly afford to, and stay with it. And think about the history. The history is on Bitcoin's side, that we need a new technology, a technology that's digital too, portability, digital, meets all these elements of money, and that will get us to the future. That's what we need, and that's what people need to hang on for. So anyway, new challenge token information is up. Join us on our Telegram. We are releasing version 8, I think by now. It should be pretty much getting done. Go to CHL real quick and see what's going on with that, and follow our team. Follow our token. This is the first way for people to get cryptocurrency. If you're worried about the price of Bitcoin, just start accumulating challenge tokens. You can accumulate challenge tokens for very little money. You're worried about $36,000 Bitcoin. Well, right now we're trading for hundreds of a penny. Start accumulating challenge tokens, because you can turn those into Bitcoin, and you can get challenge tokens for just doing things, simple tasks. So take your time, invest it in challenge by doing things, accumulating some cryptocurrency. And we were up 53% today. So as our token becomes more valuable, and as we become traded more against other cryptos like EOS, which we are traded easily now against EOS, in the future, easier to trade against Bitcoin, you can convert this digital currency, this CHL, into Bitcoin. And there you go. There's your opportunity to get in Bitcoin and not have to worry about how high it is, because you're getting it for very little money. It's an extra step because you got to do challenge. You got to, get on our challenge application. You got to complete some challenges. You got to get some free crypto. Maybe the spinning wheel helps you out. You see, we got $2,000 available for that right now. You hit the spinning wheel. That gets you a step closer to maybe having a tenth of a Bitcoin, or a 5% of a Bitcoin, or 6% of a Bitcoin. I mean, that's the way we all started. That's the way I started. I think my first purchase of a Bitcoin was, I think 3 or 4% of a Bitcoin. And I was really happy. I was really happy when I had 10% of a Bitcoin. 1/10 of one Bitcoin got me really excited. I made a video around that time that the time for buying a whole entire Bitcoin is soon fading away. And I was right. You can look at the video. It's a little over a year ago. That's when it was $5,000-$6,000. Say, buy one today, because if you can't buy it today, it's going to be harder to buy it in the future. And now it is. Now, instead of coming up with 5,000, you got to come up with 30,000. So, and in the future, instead of coming up with 30,000, you'll have to come up with 100,000. So that's just the way the money game plays, and that's the way it works out. But you want to buy it, because this will alleviate a lot of your fears and anxieties about the future. And that's why I'm talking about it, and that's why I'm hoping people buy it, because I don't want them to struggle with what's going to happen to them in their lives as the financials, as the future of this financing, this money game of money creation, the magical money creation that keeps on happening, just ends up pricing everybody out of everything. And that's what's going to happen if you don't get yourself into some stable currency or some stable investment. And that's what Bitcoin is, a stable investment. Get into it. However way you can get into it, by taking some of your own money, or by doing a token that will build some equity in that token that you can convert into Bitcoin. That's what you need to do. I appreciate you watching. Thank you very much.